Welcome back to Midnight Affair Tales. Thank you for joining us. Her moans filled the room raw and uninhibited, as her lover fucked her against the bed frame I had built with my own hands. The sheets she once wrapped around me now clung to her naked body, drenched in betrayal. She thought I was a clueless fool, an average man who couldn't give her the life she craved. What she didn't know was that I was pulling in $1.5 million a year, and every gasp and thrust she gave him was feeding my plan for revenge. This wasn't just her secret, it was my stage, and I was about to set the world on fire. Sitting in my luxury car parked just outside, I watched it all unfold on the hidden cameras I had installed in our bedroom. My chest burned with a mix of rage and dark satisfaction. Scarlett, the woman I had once worshipped, thought she was playing me. But tonight she was the star of her own downfall. I flicked my phone screen off, gripping the steering wheel. If she wanted passion, betrayal, and fire, I'd give it to her. Dear audience, what would you do if you discovered your partner was betraying your trust like this? Would you forgive them or seek revenge? It hadn't taken much to uncover Scarlett's lies. A late-night text to her lover, a suspicious charge on her credit card, and the subtle smell of cologne that wasn't mine. What stung wasn't just her betrayal, it was the audacity of it. She flaunted her lover, a broke personal trainer named Caleb, as if he was some irresistible god. I had spent years building my wealth in silence, living modestly so Scarlett wouldn't feel outshined. But the moment I saw them together at that cheap motel, laughing like they had won, I realized I had been shielding the wrong person from the truth. Caleb might have given her stolen kisses, but he couldn't give her the life I had built, a life she had spat on. The day after catching her, I walked into our home like nothing had changed. Scarlett greeted me with a smile, her lies as polished as ever. "How was work, babe?" she asked, her voice as sweet as poison. I kissed her cheek, forcing myself to play the part. "Busy. I'm closing a big deal soon," I replied, the irony tasting bitter on my tongue. Over the next few days I began laying my trap. Scarlett had no idea I had transferred most of my assets into a hidden account. Nor did she know that the house she flaunted to her friends was now under my name alone. As she slipped away to meet Caleb, I prepared the stage for her ultimate humiliation. She thought she was leaving me for something better. But what she didn't know was that I was about to make her regret every choice she had made. The game had begun. Scarlett had perfected her deception, her soft lips murmuring, "I love you," each night as though her body hadn't just been tangled with another man. It was almost laughable. I played along, my heart cold but my smile warm. She thought she was clever, but I was always one step ahead. When she left that afternoon, claiming she had a girl's lunch, I quietly followed her. The address she entered wasn't a restaurant, it was Caleb's shabby apartment. Through the cracked blinds, I saw them pressed against the wall, his hands gripping her thighs as she begged for him like a desperate woman. My blood boiled, but I stayed rooted, the thrill of my plan keeping my rage in check. Scarlett thought she was building her escape with Caleb, but little did she know she was walking straight into my trap. The lease Caleb had recently signed? I was the landlord. The jewelry Scarlett had been parading around? Paid for by my anonymous account. Every piece of her new life was orchestrated by me, and she had no idea. The next morning, I woke her with a kiss on the forehead, pretending to be the loving husband she still believed I was. "I've been thinking," I began as she sipped her coffee. "Why don't we take a weekend trip? Just the two of us?" Her eyes darted nervously. "Oh, I have plans this weekend." "Cancel them," I said with a soft smile, my tone leaving no room for argument. She hesitated but eventually agreed. Little did she know, the trip wasn't about rekindling our romance. It was my first move in dismantling her world. I had booked us a luxurious stay in the mountains, complete with breathtaking views and private hot springs. Scarlett seemed relaxed, sipping champagne by the fire, oblivious to the storm brewing. While she was busy texting Caleb under the table, I was finalizing my next step, an anonymous tip to Caleb's boss that would cost him his job and shatter the illusion of stability Scarlett had clung to. By the time we returned from our trip, Scarlett was on edge. Caleb's sudden unemployment had left him broke and desperate. She spent hours locked in the bathroom, whispering frantic words into her phone, trying to calm him down. I pretended not to notice, acting as the supportive husband. "Is everything okay, Scarlett? You've been so distant lately," I asked one evening, feigning concern. "It's just work stress," she lied, her voice trembling. I nodded, hiding my satisfaction. The cracks were forming, and it was only a matter of time before her perfect little world came crashing down. As she slept that night, I sent an anonymous email to her family with carefully selected photos of her and Caleb. Photos that left no room for doubt about what she had been doing. By morning, her phone was flooded with calls and messages, her once pristine image in tatters. Scarlett's world was unraveling one thread at a time, and she still had no idea who was pulling the strings. The fallout from Caleb's sudden job loss was swift and brutal. He wasn't just broke, he was desperate. Scarlett had been funding their secret escapades, but now her credit cards were mysteriously declined. She didn't realize I'd cut her access, disguising it as a banking error. Caleb, once her strong and seductive lover, was now nothing but a panicked mess, begging her for money. I kept a close watch, feeding my revenge with every argument they had. Scarlett started showing signs of stress. Her once flawless exterior was cracking, her smile faltering when she thought I wasn't looking. Is something wrong? I asked one evening as I handed her a glass of wine. No, everything's fine, she replied, her voice sharp and defensive. But it wasn't fine. Caleb had become her liability instead of her escape, and I had no intention of letting her find stability again. That same night, I sent Caleb a fake message, posing as an anonymous friend. The message included a fabricated story about Scarlett planning to drop him and return to me for financial security. The seed of doubt was planted, and Caleb, insecure and broke, began questioning her loyalty. Their next meeting wasn't filled with passion. Instead, it was a fiery argument, their voices loud enough for my hidden cameras to catch every word. "You think I don't know you're using me?" Caleb yelled. "Go back to your rich husband if you want money." Scarlett stormed out of his apartment, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. She returned home late that night, her mood dark, but I played dumb. "Rough day?" I asked casually, knowing full well the chaos I had orchestrated. She gave me a forced smile, but the cracks in her facade were growing deeper. The next phase of my plan was bold, calculated, and utterly devastating. Scarlett had built her life on a foundation of appearances. She was the perfect wife, the charming hostess, the woman everyone envied. But I knew the truth, and it was time for the world to see it too. I attended a charity gala alone that evening, playing the role of a devoted husband whose wife was too unwell to attend. My absence from Scarlett was intentional. She had used the opportunity to sneak off and meet Caleb again, desperate to patch things up. What she didn't know was that I had already leaked an edited video of their earlier encounters to the very social circle she tried to impress. The footage wasn't explicit, but it was damning enough, showing her entering Caleb's apartment late at night and leaving disheveled hours later. By the time Scarlett returned home, her phone was ablaze with messages from friends, colleagues, and even her family. "What's going on?" she snapped, her eyes wide with panic as she scrolled through the texts. "Everything okay?" I asked, feigning concern. She turned to me, her face pale. "Someone's spreading lies about me." I kept my expression neutral, hiding the satisfaction bubbling inside me. "Lies?" I said softly. "What kind of lies?" She didn't answer, storming off to the bedroom to call Caleb, but he didn't answer. The pressure was mounting, and I could see the fear in her eyes. She was cornered, her image shattered, and I wasn't done yet. As Scarlett struggled to contain the fallout, Caleb's desperation reached new heights. The message I'd sent him continued to gnaw at his fragile ego, and with no job and mounting debt, he began to see Scarlett as a burden rather than a lover. During their next heated exchange, Caleb snapped. "You think you can play both sides, Scarlett? Don't act like you're a victim here," he yelled, his frustration boiling over. "I left everything for you," she screamed back, her voice breaking. "Then maybe you shouldn't have," he spat, slamming the door in her face. Scarlett returned home that night, her shoulders slumped, her confidence shattered. She didn't realize it yet, but she was running out of options. And I, the man she had underestimated, was just getting started. Scarlett's world was crumbling faster than she could comprehend. The public whispers, Caleb's growing resentment, and my seemingly unwavering devotion. All of it was too much for her to handle. Yet, she tried to keep up the facade, hoping her lies would hold long enough for her to regain control. I continued to play my role, offering her comfort and kindness. "You seem tense lately," I said one evening, handing her a glass of wine. "Is there anything I can do to help?" She shook her head, forcing a smile. Just work stress, she lied again. But I could see the way her hand trembled as she held the glass, the way her eyes darted nervously around the room. The guilt was eating her alive and I reveled in it. Behind the scenes I was pulling even more strings. I reached out to a journalist friend, feeding them an anonymous tip about its scandal involving Scarlett and Caleb. The story was vague enough to protect my involvement but damning enough to spread like wildfire. By the time the article hit the gossip columns, Scarlett was in full-blown panic mode. Her phone buzzed incessantly, and the color drained from her face as she read the headlines. Exclusive: Socialite's affair with broke lover exposed. She looked at me across the room, her expression a mix of fear and desperation. "Did you see this?" she asked, her voice shaking. I feigned ignorance, glancing at my phone. "Wow, that's unfortunate," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Her world was collapsing and she still had no idea who was behind it. Caleb was done. The gossip, the financial strain, and Scarlett's growing paranoia had pushed him to his limit. He packed his bags and left without a word, leaving her stranded in the mess they had created together. When Scarlett showed up at his apartment, banging on the door and begging him to let her in, she found nothing but an empty room. Her calls went unanswered, her texts ignored. Caleb, the man she had thrown everything away for, had abandoned her when she needed him most. I watched her return home that night, her eyes red from crying, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She didn't even try to hide her distress anymore. "Is everything okay?" I asked, pretending to be the concerned husband. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing. "It's all falling apart," she admitted, her voice muffled against my chest. I stroked her hair, hiding my smirk. "It's okay," I said softly. "We'll figure it out together." But I had no intention of saving her. This was just another step in my plan to make her regret every choice she had made. With Caleb gone, Scarlett turned her attention back to me, desperate to salvage what she could. She began asking about our finances, subtly probing to see if she could still rely on me for support. "I've been thinking," she said one evening, her tone carefully measured. "Maybe we could move somewhere quieter, start fresh." I raised an eyebrow. "Why would we do that? I've worked hard to build our life here." She faltered, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I just think it might be good for us." Her desperation was palpable, but I didn't let it show that I knew. Instead, I began dismantling her financial safety net piece by piece. I canceled her credit cards, citing fraudulent activity. I moved our joint savings into a private account she couldn't access. Scarlett's world, once filled with luxury and comfort, was shrinking rapidly. She started selling her designer bags and jewelry, unaware that I was buying them back anonymously, ensuring she had nowhere to turn. As she struggled to make sense of it all, I stayed by her side, pretending to be the supportive husband. "We'll get through this," I assured her, my voice steady. But in reality, I was savoring every moment of her downfall. Scarlett's once bustling social life had dwindled to nothing. Friends who once adored her now avoided her, whispering about the scandal that had tarnished her perfect image. Invitations to glamorous parties stopped coming, and even her family had grown distant. She spent most of her days pacing the house, her nerves fraying with each passing moment. I of course played the doting husband. "Why don't you reach out to some of your friends?" I suggested casually one evening as I worked on my laptop. Her voice trembled as she responded, "They've all been busy lately." I hid my smirk behind the screen. Busy wasn't the issue. I had ensured every door she tried to open would remain closed. I had anonymously shared the scandalous article with her closest friends, ensuring the whispers would spread like wildfire. Scarlett, once the queen of her social circle, was now an outcast. And I wasn't done yet. Scarlett's financial situation grew worse by the day. With no access to our joint accounts and her dwindling personal funds, she began selling more of her possessions. The designer handbags, the jewelry, even her prized art collection, all gone. One evening, as she stared at her laptop, a deep frown creased her forehead. "Do you know why my credit score suddenly dropped?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. I shrugged, feigning ignorance. "No idea. Have you checked for errors?" In truth, I had been systematically sabotaging her credit behind the scenes. Late payments, mysterious charges, and account closures, all orchestrated by me. Scarlett had no idea that the man she thought she could still lean on was the one pulling the strings. Her desperation reached new heights when debt collectors began calling. She tried to hide it from me, but I overheard the frantic conversations late at night. "There's been a mistake," she pleaded over the phone, her voice shaking. "I'll sort it out soon." But there would be no sorting it out. As Scarlett's life spiraled out of control, I knew it was time to push her over the edge. She had destroyed everything I once held sacred, and now it was my turn to take it all back. I left a single envelope on the kitchen counter one morning, knowing she would find it when I was gone. Inside was a copy of her incriminating photos and a single message: "I know everything." When I returned home that evening, Scarlett was sitting at the kitchen table, the envelope in front of her. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she clutched the photos. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I dropped my keys on the counter, meeting her gaze with cold detachment. "It's exactly what it looks like," I replied. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized the extent of my knowledge. "I can explain," she stammered, her voice breaking. "No need," I said flatly. "You've already said enough." Scarlett's world had officially crumbled, and the final act was just beginning. The silence between us hung like a blade, sharp and ready to cut. Scarlett tried to approach me, her tears staining her flawless face. "Please let me explain," she pleaded, reaching out to touch my arm. I yanked away, my voice cold as ice. "Explain? You fucked another man in our bed, Scarlett. There's nothing to explain." Her sobs grew louder, but I wasn't done. I slammed my fist on the counter, making her jump. "Do you even understand what you've done? I built this life for us, for you. I sacrificed everything, and you threw it away for some broke idiot who can't even keep a job." She crumbled, falling to her knees. "I was stupid, okay? I made a mistake." I laughed bitterly, the sound void of humor. "A mistake? Sleeping with him wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. Lying to me every fucking day was a choice. And now, Scarlett, you'll face the consequences of those choices." Her eyes widened in terror, but she still didn't understand the storm I was about to unleash. "Please give me a chance to fix this," she begged, her voice desperate. I leaned in, my face inches from hers. "Fix it? You can't fix this, Scarlett. But I can. And I will. Your perfect little world is gone, and I'll make damn sure you feel every ounce of pain you've caused me." Later that night, I watched her from the doorway as she sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulders hunched in defeat. The same bed where she had writhed under another man's touch, moaning his name as if I didn't exist. "You liked it, didn't you?" I said, my voice low and dangerous. She flinched, turning to face me. "What are you talking about?" "You liked the way he fucked you. The way he made you feel." My words were venom, each one cutting deeper than the last. Her face turned crimson, a mix of shame and fear. "That's not true. Don't lie to me," I roared, stepping closer. "You let him touch you, kiss you, fuck you, all while coming home to me like nothing was wrong. Did you even think about me while you were spreading your legs for him?" Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't care. I wanted her to feel the humiliation, the betrayal, the rage that had consumed me. "You think he loves you?" I spat. "He used you, Scarlett. Just like you used me. But now the tables have turned." Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. The next morning, Scarlett woke up to find every trace of her former life gone. Her designer clothes, her expensive jewelry, even her precious wedding ring, I had taken it all. She ran downstairs, panic etched across her face. "Where's all my stuff?" "Gone," I said flatly, sipping my coffee. "What do you mean gone?" she demanded, her voice rising. "I sold it," I replied, meeting her gaze with cold indifference. "Every last piece. You don't deserve any of it." Her jaw dropped in shock. "You can't do that." "I can, and I did. You see, Scarlett, everything you had was because of me. And now you have nothing." She stared at me, her lips trembling. "You can't just leave me with nothing." I stood, my towering presence making her shrink back. "Oh, I'm not done yet. This is just the beginning. By the time I'm through with you, you'll wish you had never crossed me." Scarlett's tears fell freely, but they didn't move me. This was my revenge, and I was just getting started. Scarlett sat on the floor of our once pristine living room, surrounded by empty spaces where her designer furniture used to be. I had sold it all in the dead of night, leaving her with nothing but the cold, hard truth. "You took everything from me," she screamed, her voice cracking. I leaned against the doorway, my arms crossed. "No, Scarlett. You took everything from yourself. I'm just finishing the job." Her anger ignited into desperation. "You can't do this to me. I gave you years of my life." I laughed coldly, the sound cutting through her protests. "You gave me lies, Scarlett. You fucked another man while pretending to be my loving wife. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" She lunged at me, her fists pounding against my chest, but her strength was nothing compared to my resolve. I grabbed her wrists and pinned her against the wall, my face inches from hers. "Do you think he'd take you now? Without your money, your luxury, your perfect little act? You're nothing to him, Scarlett. Just a cheap fuck he used and discarded." Her tears streamed down her face, her sobs filling the room. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she whispered. I let her go, stepping back. "You didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And now you'll live with it." Her knees buckled and she collapsed to the floor, broken and defeated. Scarlett thought her worst days were behind her, but she was wrong. I made sure of it. The gala she had been planning to attend, her chance to redeem herself? I had other plans. That night, I stood in front of a room full of her closest friends and acquaintances, holding a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice calm and steady, "I'd like to share a little story about loyalty, or the lack of it." Scarlett froze at the entrance, her face pale as the crowd turned to look at her. I continued, ignoring her silent plea for mercy. "Imagine spending years building a life with someone, only to find out they were sneaking around with another man. Imagine the betrayal, the lies, the humiliation." The room buzzed with whispers, eyes darting between me and Scarlett. "And the man?" I added with a bitter laugh. "He couldn't even hold a job. Talk about trading gold for garbage." Scarlett bolted from the room, tears streaming down her face, but the damage was done. The whispers would follow her wherever she went, her reputation forever tarnished. While Scarlett's world was falling apart, Caleb wasn't spared from my wrath either. I made sure every potential employer in town knew about his reputation, sending anonymous letters with just enough truth to ensure he'd never work again. One night, I caught Scarlett on the phone with him, her voice desperate. "We can still fix this, Caleb. We just need to stick together." I yanked the phone from her hand, slamming it against the wall. "You think he's going to save you?" I roared. "He's as useless as you are." Scarlett backed away, her eyes wide with fear. "Please just stop this," she begged. I grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at me. "Stop? Oh, Scarlett, I'm just getting started. By the time I'm done, you won't have a shred of dignity left." Her tears didn't faze me. This was the revenge I had planned, and I wasn't about to stop now. I wasn't satisfied with just ruining Scarlett's life. Caleb needed to feel the weight of my anger too. He had played his part in this betrayal, and I wanted to make sure he suffered just as much as she did. I tracked him to the rundown bar where he spent most of his time these days, drowning in cheap whiskey. As I approached him, I could see the tired desperation etched on his face. He looked up, his eyes narrowing when he recognized me. "You," he spat, slamming his glass on the table. "Me," I said calmly, pulling out the chair across from him. "What the fuck do you want?" he growled, his words slurred. I leaned in close, my voice low and deadly. "You fucked my wife. Now I'm here to return the favor, by fucking your life." His drunken bravado faltered, fear flickering in his eyes. "Look man, I didn't know she was married. Don't lie to me." I slammed my fist on the table, cutting him off. The bar went silent as everyone turned to watch. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You thought you could steal from me and get away with it? Think again." I left him with a chilling promise. "Every job you apply for, every chance you think you have at a future, I'll be there to make sure you lose it. You'll never escape me, Caleb." He sank into his seat, his cocky demeanor crumbling. The bartender came over, but I waved him off, leaving Caleb to sit there, broken and defeated. Scarlett was unraveling faster than I expected. Her calls to Caleb went unanswered, and the whispers around town had grown louder. She barely ate, barely slept, her once pristine appearance now a shadow of its former self. One night, she confronted me, her voice trembling with anger and desperation. "Why are you doing this to me?" I smirked, leaning against the kitchen counter. "Doing this to you? Scarlett, you did this to yourself. You thought you could cheat, lie, and humiliate me without facing any consequences? Think again." Her tears spilled over as she sank to the floor, sobbing. "I was stupid, okay? I made a mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly, crouching down to her level. A mistake is forgetting to turn off the stove, Scarlett. You didn't make a mistake, you made a choice. And now you'll live with it. She reached for my hand but I pulled away, disgusted. You don't get to ask for forgiveness. Not after what you've done. I left her there, crumpled and crying on the cold tile floor. The next morning, I handed her a single envelope as she sat at the dining table, her hands trembling as she took it. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your future," I said flatly. Inside were divorce papers, along with a detailed list of her infidelities and the financial ruin I had orchestrated. "Sign it," I said, my tone icy. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with panic. "You can't do this." "I already have," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "You can fight me in court, but trust me, Scarlett, you'll lose. Sign the papers and walk away with what little dignity you have left." Her hands shook as she read through the documents, tears streaming down her face. I didn't care. She deserved every ounce of pain she was feeling. Scarlett sat in the darkened living room, the divorce papers untouched on the coffee table. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but her expression had hardened into something I hadn't seen in a long time, defiance. "You think you've won, don't you?" she hissed when I entered the room. I smirked, unbuttoning my jacket. "Won? Scarlett, this isn't a game. This is justice. And yes, I've won." She stood, her fists clenched at her sides. "You're a monster." I stepped closer, my voice low and venomous. "No, Scarlett. I'm the man you underestimated. You lied to me, fucked another man in my bed and thought you could get away with it? You made me into this." Her jaw trembled, but she didn't back down. "You're taking everything from me. You gave it all away the moment you spread your legs for Caleb," I snapped, my voice rising. "Do you even hear yourself? You're not a victim here. You're a goddamn liar and a cheat, and now you're paying the price." She slapped me, her palm cracking against my cheek, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I laughed, a cold, humorless sound that filled the room. "Is that all you've got?" I asked, my tone mocking. Her defiance crumbled as I loomed over her, my fury palpable. "This isn't even the worst of it, Scarlett. You haven't seen what I'm truly capable of. But you will." Caleb had tried to rebuild his life, but I made sure he failed at every turn. Every job interview ended with a quiet phone call from me, ensuring he never got a second chance. His bank account, already pitiful, was drained after a fake loan scam I had orchestrated. One night he showed up at my office, drunk and desperate. "You," he slurred, stumbling toward me. I stood from my desk, my expression calm but my eyes blazing with fury. "What the fuck do you want, Caleb?" "You ruined me," he shouted, his voice cracking. I walked around the desk, stopping inches from his face. "No, Caleb. You ruined yourself the moment you touched my wife." He swung at me but I dodged effortlessly, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back. "You think you're a man?" I hissed in his ear. "You're nothing but a pathetic excuse for one. You thought you could take what's mine and walk away? You'll pay for this every single day of your miserable life." I shoved him to the floor, watching as he scrambled to his feet and stumbled out the door. He was broken, and I had no intention of letting him recover. Scarlett's defiance had turned into desperation. She avoided me in the house, her once confident demeanor replaced with fear. Every time I entered a room she flinched, her eyes darting to the exit. One night, she cornered me in the hallway, her hands trembling as she gripped my arm. "Please, let's talk. I'll do anything to fix this." I yanked my arm free, my voice icy. "You can't fix this, Scarlett. It's too late." She sank to her knees, her tears falling onto the hardwood floor. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Just tell me what you want." I crouched down, my voice low and deadly. "What I want is for you to suffer the way you made me suffer. I want you to feel the humiliation, the betrayal, the rage that you inflicted on me. And until you've felt every ounce of it, I won't stop." Her sobs filled the hallway as I walked away, leaving her broken and alone. Scarlett's prized possessions, her designer clothes, luxury handbags, and expensive jewelry, had all been carefully collected for one purpose: a public auction. Not just any auction, but one held in the heart of the town where her reputation had already been tarnished. She found out the morning of the event, her face pale as she stared at the flyer I had deliberately left on the counter. "You can't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. I leaned against the doorway, my arms crossed. "Oh, I can. Every piece of your shallow life will be on display for everyone to see. Let them bid on the scraps of what you once were. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. This wasn't about her feelings anymore, it was about her downfall. That evening, as I stood in the crowd, watching strangers eagerly bid on Scarlett's belongings, I felt a dark satisfaction. Each item represented a piece of her betrayal, and each sale was a step closer to her total humiliation. Scarlett arrived halfway through the event, her face flushed with anger and despair. "Stop this," she shouted, her voice breaking. The crowd turned to look at her, their whispers growing louder. I stepped forward, my voice cold and firm. "This is what happens when you destroy trust, Scarlett. You lose everything." She stormed out, tears streaming down her face, but the damage was done. By the end of the night, every last item had been sold, and Scarlett was left with nothing but the clothes on her back. With Scarlett's life in shambles, I decided it was time to turn up the heat. I compiled every photo, video, and text message I had of her affair with Caleb and sent it to everyone she knew. Friends, family, even her workplace. The fallout was immediate. Her phone buzzed incessantly as messages of shock and disappointment poured in. She tried to explain, to salvage what little dignity she had left, but the evidence was damning. That evening she confronted me, her face pale and her voice shaking. "You did this," she accused, holding up her phone. I smirked, unbothered by her anger. "Damn right I did. You thought you could lie, cheat, and betray me without consequences? Think again." Her tears didn't faze me. I wanted her to feel the humiliation, the shame, the utter helplessness I had felt when I discovered her betrayal. "You've ruined me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, Scarlett," I said, my tone cold and unrelenting. "You ruined yourself. I'm just making sure the world knows the truth. Caleb wasn't safe from my wrath either." Using the same damning evidence, I exposed his role in the affair to his friends and family. His reputation, already fragile, crumbled under the weight of the scandal. One night he showed up at our house, his face flushed with anger. "You've gone too far," he shouted as I opened the door. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "Too far? Caleb, you crossed the line the moment you touched my wife. She came to me," he argued, his voice desperate. "And you took what didn't belong to you," I growled, stepping closer. "Now you'll pay for it." Before he could respond, I shoved him back, my anger boiling over. "You're a fucking coward, Caleb. You thought you could take what's mine and walk away unscathed? You're nothing but a parasite, feeding off what others have built." He stumbled, his confidence shattered. "This isn't over," he muttered before walking away. I watched him leave, a dark satisfaction settling in my chest. Caleb's world was in ruins just like Scarlett's, and I wasn't done yet. Scarlett's desperation reached new heights. She attempted to salvage what little was left of her reputation by visiting Caleb, hoping to rekindle the only bond she had left. She thought I wouldn't find out, but I had eyes everywhere. The moment she stepped into his dingy apartment, I received a notification from the tracker I had placed on her phone. I watched through the hidden camera I'd installed during Caleb's last drunken outing. She begged him to take her back, her voice trembling with desperation. "We can make it work," she pleaded. Caleb, now a broken shell of himself, laughed bitterly. "You've ruined my life, Scarlett. I can't even get a fucking job because of you. Why the hell would I want you back?" Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please, I have no one else." I slammed my laptop shut, rage coursing through me. She still thought she could crawl back to him? After everything? This time I wasn't just angry, I was livid. That night, I confronted her as soon as she walked through the door. "How was Caleb?" I asked, my voice dripping with venom. Her face paled. "What are you talking about?" I stepped closer, my fists clenched. "Don't lie to me. I saw you, Scarlett." You begged him like the pathetic little cheat you are. Her mouth opened to protest, but I cut her off. "You think you can humiliate me again? After everything I've done for you? You disgust me." She stumbled back, fear evident in her eyes. I towered over her, my voice cold and deadly. "You'll regret every single fucking decision you've made. And I won't stop until you're left with nothing." Scarlett thought she could fight the divorce, but she underestimated how far I was willing to go. I had hired the best lawyers money could buy, ensuring she wouldn't see a single penny of my fortune. The court proceedings were brutal. Every detail of her affair was laid bare, every damning piece of evidence displayed for the judge and jury. Scarlett sat in silence, her head bowed as her dirty laundry was aired for all to see. My lawyer didn't hold back. This woman betrayed her husband, lied to him, and used his wealth to fund her affair. She deserves nothing. Scarlett's lawyer tried to argue for leniency, but it was futile. The evidence was overwhelming and the court was unsympathetic. By the end of the trial, Scarlett was left with nothing but her shame. As we left the courtroom, she approached me, her eyes pleading. "Please, I have nowhere to go." I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing in the cold courthouse hallway. "That's not my problem, Scarlett. You made your bed, now lie in it." Her tears didn't move me. This was her reckoning and I had no intention of showing mercy. With Scarlett legally out of my life, I turned my focus back to Caleb. He had managed to scrape together a semblance of stability, but I wasn't done with him yet. I tracked down his landlord, buying the property outright. The next day, Caleb received an eviction notice, giving him 24 hours to vacate. He showed up at my office, his face red with rage. "You've done enough," he shouted, slamming his fists on my desk. I leaned back in my chair, a smirk playing on my lips. "Not nearly enough, Caleb. You took what wasn't yours and now you're paying the price." His bravado faltered, his voice breaking. "You've ruined my life." I stood, towering over him. "And I'll do it again if you ever cross me. Now get the fuck out of my office before I have security throw you out." Caleb left, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched him go, satisfied that his suffering was far from over. Scarlett's life had reached rock bottom. With no money, no friends, and no family willing to take her in after the scandal, she found herself wandering the streets, clutching a single suitcase filled with what little she had left. I watched her from a distance, seated comfortably in my car. There she was, the woman who had once been my world, now reduced to nothing but a shadow of her former self. She stood on a street corner, shivering in the cold night air, her eyes scanning the crowd for anyone who might show her kindness. She didn't recognize me as I approached. I leaned against a lamppost, watching her fidget nervously. "Tough night, Scarlett?" I asked casually, my voice startling her. Her head snapped up, her eyes widening when she saw me. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw. "I have nowhere to go." I let out a low chuckle, shaking my head. "And whose fault is that?" She reached for my hand, desperation etched across her face. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Just help me. Please." I yanked my hand away, my expression cold. "Help you? After everything you've done? No, Scarlett. You don't deserve my help. You don't deserve anything." Tears streamed down her face as I walked away, leaving her alone in the darkness. Caleb's eviction had left him with nowhere to go. He spent his nights bouncing between cheap motels and even cheaper bars, drowning his sorrows in whiskey. But his downward spiral didn't end there. One night he showed up at my doorstep, his face gaunt and his clothes disheveled. "Please," he slurred, his voice thick with alcohol. "Just let me explain." I stared at him, my anger simmering beneath the surface. "Explain what? That you're a worthless piece of shit who thought he could take what's mine?" He stumbled forward, grabbing my arm. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he pleaded. I shoved him back, my voice rising. "You didn't mean for it to go this far? You fucked my wife, Caleb. You destroyed everything I built, and now you want sympathy?" He fell to his knees, his head in his hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I leaned down, my voice low and menacing. "Sorry doesn't fix what you've done. You'll live with this for the rest of your miserable life." I turned and slammed the door, his cries echoing behind me. Scarlett's shame became public knowledge when she was spotted outside a local shelter, her once polished appearance replaced with a disheveled, broken image. The photos were plastered all over social media, accompanied by mocking captions and cruel comments. I couldn't help but smirk as I scrolled through the posts. She had been the picture of perfection, the envy of everyone who knew her. Now she was nothing but a cautionary tale. When she called me that evening, her voice trembling, I let it ring a few times before answering. "What do you want, Scarlett?" I asked, my tone indifferent. "Please, just talk to me," she begged. "I'm sorry for everything. I don't know what to do." I let out a bitter laugh. "You don't know what to do? Maybe you should have thought about that before you spread your legs for another man." Her sobs filled the line, but I felt nothing. "Goodbye, Scarlett," I said coldly, hanging up without another word. As Scarlett's life spiraled into chaos, She began piecing together the truth about the man she had betrayed. Her curiosity turned to desperation when she realized just how little she truly knew about me. She visited the local library using their computers to search my name. What she found left her trembling. The articles painted a picture of a man she had never truly understood, a self-made millionaire with an annual income of over $1.5 million. She read about my real estate empire, my investment ventures, and my philanthropic efforts. The realization hit her like a slap in the face. While she had been running to Caleb for thrills, I had been building a fortune in silence. When she returned to the shelter that night, she clutched the printed articles to her chest, her mind racing. She finally understood what she had thrown away. The next morning she showed up at my office. The receptionist tried to stop her, but I waved her in, leaning back in my leather chair as she entered. "I didn't know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Didn't know what? That I'm worth more than you could ever imagine? That while you were sneaking around, I was earning $1.5 million a year?" She dropped to her knees, clutching at the edge of my desk. "I made a mistake. I'll do anything to fix this. Please give me another chance." I leaned forward, my voice icy. "Another chance? Scarlett, you didn't just betray me. You underestimated me. And that's a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life." While Scarlett wrestled with the weight of her mistakes, Caleb was reaching his breaking point. Homeless and jobless, he spent his days wandering aimlessly, haunted by the consequences of his choices. One afternoon he crossed paths with an old friend, who didn't hesitate to point out his downfall. "You fucked up, Caleb," the man said bluntly. "You don't mess with a guy like that. He's not just some average Joe. He's a millionaire who doesn't take shit from anyone." The words hit Caleb like a punch to the gut. He had underestimated me just as Scarlett had. He realized that their little fling had been nothing more than a temporary escape, and now, it had cost him everything. Caleb tried to call Scarlett that night, but she didn't answer. He left a voicemail instead, his voice filled with regret. "I don't know what we were thinking, Scarlett. We've ruined our lives. I'm sorry for everything." But apologies wouldn't change the past, and both Caleb and Scarlett were beginning to understand the depth of their mistakes. Scarlett returned to my office a week later, her appearance haggard and her spirit broken. She dropped a folded piece of paper on my desk, a handwritten letter filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. "I don't expect you to take me back," she said softly, her voice trembling. "But I need you to know how sorry I am." I picked up the letter, scanning it briefly before tossing it aside. "Sorry doesn't fix what you've done, Scarlett. You destroyed us." She stepped closer, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do anything to make it right." I stood, towering over her. "Anything? You can't undo the past, Scarlett. You chose Caleb over me thinking I was nothing more than an average man. Now you know the truth. I'm worth more than you'll ever have, and you'll spend the rest of your life regretting the day you threw it all away." Her sobs filled the room as I walked out, leaving her alone with the weight of her mistakes. Scarlett and Caleb's lives were shadows of what they had been before their betrayal. Scarlett, once draped in luxury and adored by her social circle, now served coffee at a rundown diner. Her face was tired, her once manicured hands rough from endless shifts. Caleb, the man she had thrown it all away for, now scraped by, bouncing between odd jobs and borrowed couches. As for me, my life had never been brighter. My wealth continued to grow, my business empire thriving beyond expectations. Every victory reminded me of the life I had reclaimed, free of deceit and betrayal. One evening, I decided to stop by the diner where Scarlett worked. She spotted me as I entered, her eyes widening in recognition. Her posture stiffened as she approached my table, holding a pot of coffee. "Hi, how can I help you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked her in the eye, my expression calm yet piercing. "Just coffee," I said simply. Her hands trembled as she poured the cup, spilling a few drops onto the table. I didn't flinch. As she turned to leave, I leaned forward, my voice low and deliberate. "Tell me, Scarlett, was it worth it? Trading everything for a man who couldn't even hold you up?" She froze, her lips parting, but no words came out. I stood, leaving cash on the table. Before walking out, I turned back and said, "Some mistakes last a lifetime, Scarlett. You've made yours. I hope you live with it." As I stepped into the cool night air, I wondered, what would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven her, or would you have made her pay like I did? Let me know in the comments below.